My talk today is entitled, That You May Love One Another, Reflections on Community Size and Engagement. This afternoon, we will reflect on the relationship of community size and engagement. The purpose of this conference is to ask, how do we make it easier for young people to be Catholic? We are here to think of ways of building culture conducive to faithful vocational discernment for young people. We may think that if we have the right resources, programs, or maybe do something that's jazzy and hip, that this will attract young people. Of course, these programs or resources are more readily available, especially the parishes that are large, that is, have both a lot of people and a lot of money. My argument that this is not necessarily the case, but rather we need to think small and lean as far as resources, money, and people are concerned. This is because the vast majority of our faith communities do not really have an abundance of either people or money. I propose that we think of community and mission as being integral. We can often think of religious education or youth ministry as separate ministries from, say, an altar society or a men's group like the Knights of Columbus, or even separate from the Sunday synaxis, Mass or Divine Liturgy. I propose that youth engagement is not a distinct program, but rather is conceptually, thoughtfully, and actively woven into the tapestry of parish life. To do this effectively, community sizes must be small. In this presentation, I shall reflect on why this is the way to go by first examining the psychological relationship of individuals to community. Next, I will consider a scriptural theme that not only justifies, but warrants, and may even demand small integrated faith communities. Finally, I shall offer observations from my own experience in small faith communities, stemming from membership in Greek Catholic and Orthodox communities, and even my own experience in forming a Byzantine Catholic mission. Psychological dimensions. There is a popular and somewhat controversial psychological theory in the nebulous out there that says that there is a limitation on how many meaningful relationships an individual can maintain at one time. The theory states that humans are capable of maintaining only about an average of 150 or so friends. A friend is someone that an individual makes the effort to maintain the relationship at least once a year and has a reasonable expectation of reciprocation appropriate to that relationship. I call this meaningful relationship. The psychological limitation of 150 meaningful relationships is known in the literature as Dunbar's number. This is a general average that was first predicted based on the observations of lower primates. The size of primate groups was found to correlate to neocortex volume. From there, a formula was developed that predicted the average human social group is limited to approximately 150 individuals. The limit was corroborated by the size of Neolithic and medieval English villages, as well as Roman military units. Research into 19th century utopian colonies, as well as studies in social media, such as Twitter or Facebook, further corroborated the psychological limit. Finally, a 1974 study by the Church of England found that this was to be the ideal size of a parish. Dunbar's number is not a hard and fast number. Studies show that any individual can range in between 1 and 200 individuals. But given the scale of the Catholic Church, I'll invoke the average number as the model of ideal community size in this paper. A crucial aspect about community size is social cohesion. Recent research by Robin Dunbar and Richard Sosis show that communities formed at the 50 and 150 member layers are the most stable, in some cases for many generations. This is especially true of religious communities formed and maintained at the 150 member mark. At this point, a community is optimally self-reliant, able to maintain internal order with very few rules. Individuals are more apt to accept punishment and discipline when the entire community stands behind the punisher. Beyond this size, affinity and proximity of relationships becomes too distant, and in order to maintain order, a top-down authority structure has to be adopted. Order can be maintained in this way up to about a 500 member layer, and beyond that, social pressures become too great, and authoritarian structures must be maintained for the society to be cohesive. This talk about social order, punishment, and discipline may make us a little uncomfortable and be outside the parameters of our discussion, and it kind of is. But I mention it because of the relationship to the underlying issue that is working against many of our parishes. And this is the phenomenon of the free rider, as Robin Dunbar calls it. A free rider is someone who basically just shows up and takes from the community and doesn't really contribute to it, right? Social structures work best when all members voluntarily participate in the community with total adherence to the base rules of the community, and being a member entails a high cost of entry and level of participation. By entry cost, I do not mean a high monetary entry fee, but rather a high level of personal commitment to the community. Also, communities work best when all members are actively contributing to the community insofar as they are capable. Free riders in a community create stress because more of the burden of the care of the community is shouldered by a smaller percentage of that community. Free riding is precisely at the root why youth are not engaged in their faith community. Just showing up at Mass, even every week, or dropping the kids off to religious ed so the kids can get their sacraments like a merit badge is not enough commitment. But we all know this, right? We've heard it all weekend. In the Byzantine liturgy, the deacon concludes every litany, our version of the prayers of the faithful, with this prayer: "Let us commit ourselves and one another and our whole life to Christ our God." Past generations saw this commitment was so complete and so total that if you did not live up to the community standard, you would not be allowed to remain for the second part of the divine liturgy or Mass. To this day in the Byzantine liturgy, right before the creed, the lead deacon calls out, the doors, and wisdom. Let us be attentive." This is the call to other deacons and to the subdeacons to check the congregation, that make sure that nobody who is not going to receive communion was still present. And then to lock the doors of the church, because this moment of consecration is so sacred. This may sound draconian to our modern ears, especially for those of us who may think that the Eucharist is a place of hospitality. But in the early centuries of the church, this was not so. An individual received the body of Christ because he or she was a member, a full, committed member of the body of Christ. To be a member of the body of Christ means total and absolute commitment. And in the early church, that meant laying down your life, right? Today, this commitment has to be modeled to the youth by their parents and by all of the adults in the community. Further, the youth have to be encouraged to take growing roles within the community, again, insofar as they are capable. There are many roles liturgically and socially they can take and own. It is incumbent on all adults to mentor and guide youth growth and development in the community. Small community provides the best environment because a smaller number of people to fill roles, leaving more room, more space for the youth to help step in and be mentored, right? In a community of this size, this 150 mark, everyone has to pitch in. How can youth have ownership in their communities, in their parish, if there is no room for them to take ownership, when there are hundreds or even thousands of other people that can step in and do it instead? And in many cases do. Scriptural warrant. There is one theme from Scripture I would like to highlight today, the new commandment. Throughout the Johannine literature, and as well as in Paul's writings, we find this theme that to be a disciple of Christ means living out discipleship by loving one another. In the Gospel of John, Jesus tells the apostles, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, so also you should love one another." John 13:34. In this great discourse of Jesus, he is laying out the law for the new community. This law is to love one another as he loves us. St. Paul reminds the Thessalonians this command comes from God, 1 Thessalonians 4:9. And in his letter to the Romans, St. Paul says, "Love one another with mutual affection, outdo one another in showing honor," for chapter 12, verse 10. He goes on to say that they are to contribute to the needs of the saints, that is to other Christians, and to extend hospitality to strangers, verse 13. St. Paul did not understand Christ's commandment to be just for the apostles or for a ministerial group here, or ushers, but rather for the entire whole local church. It is a commandment for everyone in the community and for all communities to be committed to the care and concern for each and every other person in the community. How are we to know the needs of our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ unless we know who they are? How are we to be a brother or sister to everyone in our community unless we know them? How are we to identify strangers among us and open our arms in hospitality to them unless we can see them? In the parable of the lost sheep, the shepherd leaves his flock to find the one missing, Luke 15, 1 through 7. And this flock was 100 sheep, by the way. How can we, or our pastors and our deacons, identify and find the lost sheep of our communities if we do not know each and every person? How can our priests minister fully, or for that matter, each of us minister fully to each person of our community if most of the people in our communities are lost in a sea of anonymity? Personal experience and some practical suggestions. Most of my experiences with small communities usually range in communities of about 50 to 120 souls, and have been largely positive. For my home Byzantine parish, which hovers around 35 people and is actually a little bit of outlier in terms of size and engagement, visitors constantly remark about the near familial relationship that the parishioners have with each other that then spills out to all of the guests who come to liturgy and visit. Another example is the Greek Orthodox parish in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We had just moved there in 2007 and visited a couple Roman parishes. They had ushers to greet at the door, perfunctory holy handshakes at the sign of peace. They were pretty typical Roman Catholic parishes, except one was. The other one had a statue of an anthropomorphized ear of corn in the sanctuary. But we figured it was Iowa. What do you do? We weren't too impressed with these two places, and we wanted a divine liturgy. So we visited the local Greek parish, St. John the Baptist, a community of about 120 souls. After all, we figured Greeks are pretty hospitable, even to barbarians, meaning bearded ones, like me. We arrived, the priest came out of the altar to greet us, find out who we were, if we were visitors or new to the area, whether or not we were Orthodox, and so on. At the end of liturgy, he went so far as to introduce us as a new family to the community, and by name to the people, and invited us for fellowship, which they have every week, and is a light luncheon. And there we were able to talk and meet some of the people in the community. This happens every week, and the way they do this fellowship is it happens every week, and a different family hosts it, right? This particular Sunday, their Sunday school also had their summer outing, which was a trip to the community pool. The priest did not invite us to the outing. Instead, he told us we were going to the outing. Further, he paid for our admission, 2 adults and 4 children, out of his own pocket to go. So between the Roman communities and this one, which do you think we spent the next 5 years at? This community has people who drive 75 miles one way every week to attend divine liturgy. They even pass other Orthodox churches to go here, right? Even though it's been several years since we have regularly attended, folks from the community still reach out to us, invite us to parish events. We receive news when people die, there's baptisms, for instance. They share with each other as they communicate with us where we're living, how many children we're up to. We're up to 9 now. We were at like 6 when we stopped going there. How our livestock that we have on our farm are doing, and all the points of gossip that one would expect in a small village in Greece. Another example is a Romanian Greek Catholic parish in Aurora, Illinois. Like St. John's, St. George's is a parish of about 120 people. The priest comes out before liturgy to meet new people, though he does not call them out by name at the end. Several years ago, some of the younger families of this community decided they wanted to get to know the old-timers from Romania. So they instituted a coffee hour after liturgy, which then grew into a full lunch provided by the parish every week for free. The liturgy is over about 11 or 11:30, and people often do not disperse from church until 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon, which allows ample time for socialization of congregants and for the priests and the deacons to touch base with each of the parishioners who are scattered all over Illinois and Iowa. For instance, one family drove 4 hours one way twice a month to be a part of this community. The final example I would like to offer is from my own experience in forming a Byzantine Catholic mission. This community is still in its infancy. We're in our 3rd year right now. But many of the lessons we learned still apply. We currently meet at a Roman Catholic church in Iowa City. My family is the closest to the worship space. We live 45 minutes away. Most of the families come from between 1 to 2 hours away in every direction, every cardinal direction. The primary reason people come to worship with us is because of the liturgy. The beauty of the liturgy draws them. But they find the liturgy is beautiful and it is worth the sacrifice. But from that, our fellowship extends out of that. Because of the distance, we provide fellowship afterwards, right? We can't send people 2 hours away back home on an empty stomach. Secondly, we welcome people, especially small children. Because of this, nearly 2/3 of us are under age 18. Everybody knows everyone else, even to the point where I can take a census of who is missing and who is present. If someone is missing, we can reach out and see what is going on. We can talk finances, service schedules of the community with all the adults of fellowship. This allows us a great deal of flexibility and agility. The input also gives greater ownership and commitment from each member. Because of the small numbers, our teens have to take important roles in the community. One of my daughters reads the epistle. For the hours, a couple of children will take the lead in singing the psalmody. We sing some of the small hours before liturgy. They help set up and take down after every service. My daughters are talking about starting an Eastern Christian formation program. That's like our version of CCD. They think about what to bring to fellowship, which we have after every service. We have a lot of food allergies in our community, and teens and adults alike are aware of what those allergies are and thoughtful about what they bring because of how it will affect other members of the community. Moreover, these young people are excited. Dad, when is the next time liturgy? When are we going to go? Who's the priest this week? We have to rotating schedules. So who's going to be the priest this week? And it's not just my children, but all the children in the community are excited about this because they're full active members of the community and they know it. As we see from these examples, there's a high level of engagement and interaction among the congregants and between the congregation and the clergy. This is the case in many other parishes like this. The shepherd knows his sheep, and the priest knows every member of the community and can readily identify who is new. In our community, we do not have a regular priest. However, when someone is new is present, the regulars, be they adult or children, go and introduce themselves to the newcomer to make sure they have a book, invite them for fellowship, and so on. In the East, it is custom to visit that the priest come and bless the home every year. Okay, I'm going to skip that. And it's hard to do this in the time frame if you have like hundreds of people, right? About 40 households is about all they can do. In the Christian context, conclusion, in the Christian context, love is the only measure of community that matters. It is not the number of children in religious ed or the number of programs that a parish offers. It is not the alleged contemporariness or supposed cultural appropriateness of music, art, and liturgics. All these have by and large failed to retain and transform anybody, much less young people. It is certainly not the amount of money that a parish takes in weekly or the number of people who show up for Mass. These measures work against the gospel. Focusing on increasing money in numbers is at its core anti-church. But as Dan Ebner puts it, if God is love, and love is the measure of God's presence, then how is that love measured in a parish? In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, I give you a new commandment. Love one another. This theme is repeated over and over in the New Testament. This ultimately means that we, as Christians and disciples of the Master, should love each other. Given the limits of human psychology, any community beyond 150 becomes difficult to maintain cohesion without some kind of external force or top-down management. More importantly, living out this mandate of love becomes untenable. What then does small community have to do with youth engagement and missionary creativity? In the summer of 2016, there was a conference held here In the presentation from Generation to Generation by Christian Smith, whom we heard about today, and Justin Bartkus, the number one factor in determining whether youth practice their faith is whether the parents actively engage in their faith. That is, talk about, pray, and try to live it daily. Well, as we saw above, small communities foster higher levels of commitment, garner more support and resources from members, and elicit higher levels of accountability from individual members. This is largely because there is not anonymity of being in a large crowd to hide behind. Psychological and social research bear this out. The result is that adult members of the community live a life where what happens at church more frequently and spills over into the home. Further, mutual concern is modeled, lived, and the mutual concern and love for each other is extended to and enfolds the youth. This cuts across familial and generational boundaries, allows the church to reach the margins of society that large groups are not capable of. When priests are fully able to engage with each and every one of the congregation, this provides a model of service by priests and deacons that shows our youth that there is more to vocations than just an hour on Sunday. In order for priests to fully be able to minister, and for all of us to minister and to love one another, we need to consider taking steps to reduce our community size to around 150. Thank you.